on if you want to turn on your screens and unmute yourselves. There we go. Look at that. Technology is working. Jack, there we go. Look at that. We figured it out. We might not be able to figure out franchise sales in 2021, but look, we can figure out how to do a webinar. So there's that.
There you go.
Thank you to you guys for helping us put this together. Thank you to our attendees for joining us for an hour of riveting discussions about franchise sales. What I would love to do is let's kick it off with just a good intro, very simplistic, not like one of these long New York elevator rides, like a very short elevator ride on who you are. Sean, I'll let you start. Tell a little bit of your backstory.
Yeah, Sean Fitzgerald. I'm actually president of True Blue Total House Care, and been in franchising my entire professional career, and had been a focus on franchise development. So been doing it a long time.
And Jason?
Hey, yeah, I've been in franchising for about 9 years now. I started as the director of marketing and sales for a driving school brand out of Seattle for 4 years. And then I transitioned to the VP of franchise development for a restoration brand out of Denver for another 4 years. And then as of late, I've been working for a great company that's been voted best in marketing by Entrepreneur Magazine for the last 2 years. So, yeah, I'm excited to stay in the industry and be here.
Great, thank you. And Jack?
Hi, it's Jack Wilson. I'm Chief Development Officer with Family Financial Centers. I've been in the franchise industry since 2012, both as an owner, as a franchisee, as well as now with Family Financial Centers as a Azure. And what I love to say is I just help people realize their dream of business ownership. And of course, that's what we do when we help people with franchises.
All right. Now that we have those intros, to anybody who's watching us live on the webinar, you can certainly ask questions as they present themselves. But let's dive into this because we're going to move fast. Now, I don't want to keep everybody waiting to the end. So I'm going to just tee this up, and I'll go Sean, Jason, Jack with this question. And you can answer it however you want. If I say, what is the secret to franchise sales that everybody is chasing, what is it? Sean, let's start with you.
The secret to franchise sales is there's no silver bullet. That is the secret. And it's no secret. It's not easy. And I think that a brand to understand that will focus where they should, which is there's not all leads are the same, not all buyers are the same. Content is so critically important, and having that content out there that tells your brand stories is so important. How you deliver those stories is so important. So for all those that are dialing in thinking that there's going to be some golden nugget they can walk away today with and say, I solved it. You will get some, but there's gonna be a lot of golden nuggets, but there's no silver bullet.
Jason?
Yes, I totally support Sean's instruments there. So the thing that I'll add value to here is I've got a few hidden gems that I discovered in my experience that aren't readily just apparent. So one of the things that I discovered was franchise level reviews. So your reviews for your franchisees are critical for validation for franchise candidates, right? And that came to us just by doing a national review campaign with my last brand to raise all of our review awareness as part of an initiative. And then lo and behold, we got a number of new callers coming in or interested parties that said, hey, we're validating your brand. Your franchisees look like they're doing a really good job. They got great reviews. We'd like to be part of your brand. So that's a hidden gem. Your messaging. Some of the biggest messaging that gets missed is if you're an emerging brand, you're founder-led, right? Typically, your founder is your CEO. That's a big message. That's crucial. That adds a tremendous amount of value to your brand as an emerging brand. And then what are your competitors doing in the territories you're trying to target, right? So one thing we found out in the restoration industry, obviously it's pretty competitive, that some of our larger competitors with the brand awareness that they do have were sold out. So we targeted our competitors, right? So that we could ride their coattails on their marketing. And then we had better service, we had better offerings for our company. And we made that paramount message complete. So those are some hidden gems that we have used I've used in the past that either didn't come readily or I had to figure them out. So I'm sharing those with you guys as, hey, it's not a silver bullet, but it's a gem.
Appreciate that, Jack.
Yeah, I agree. No secrets here, but there are steps and processes that lead to success, and understanding what they are and constantly tweaking them to match up with current needs of your prospects, the current conditions out there, really your value proposition. All of that is dynamic. It's always changing. So if there's a secret, it's just something that we already know of. Constantly relook at and revalidate what your clients are looking for, the value of your brand, and how it connects to what is going on out in the business world.
Appreciate that. Just some comments I want to throw on top of what you guys are saying, and there's some similarities in this. One is the messaging. Anybody that's on this webinar, if you go to your franchise sales website right now and it says "Welcome" or "Look at our franchise, it's so great," that's not a why now. And I think that's the term that you need to start with is how are you positioning your brand to be relevant today? And why would anybody care to buy it now? Especially right now with all the chaos that is going on in our world, whether that's election or COVID or timing, we need to present the why now. Then we need to look at the matrix of why people buy. I believe in your product. You have a bad product, you're already playing from behind. I have a clear understanding of your leadership's vision. If that's not on your website, if your CEO does not have a message on your website, go get it on there. What territory is available? If you tell me that no, I cannot open in Kansas City, but I can go way out there in the boondocks of Kansas, you've turned me off as a buyer. So be very clear on the markets you want to grow in. How much does it cost to get in, and how much can I make? When your competitors are answering the question of how much I can make, and it's not necessarily the right answer. A lot of brands use the averages. But if they're answering it, they have a leg up to convince that buyer to give them their information and fill out the form. And validation. So often it's like scripted testimonials that are on your website of you can tell. It's like in some hotel room at your annual conference where the lighting is like capturing half of someone's face and it's intimate and they're saying this was the greatest idea that has ever come about and this is why I bought into it. True, authentic franchisee validation, you put those together and now all of a sudden you have the baseline. So let's pretend that all the baselines are there. Let's say that brand X has it. Sean, I'll go back to you because now we got to figure out how are we going to actually achieve this goal. If we're going to dominate next year, it starts with this goal. And I would say, generally speaking, in my experience, and Sean and I have had this conversation many times, CEO goes like this. 20. It's like, what? And you go, well, how many deals did you do last year? And they're like, solid 8. And you go, all right, so we want 20 this year, so we're a little bit more than double the budget. They're like, no, less budget. Go to work. So now the pressures get put on the sales team to go perform against data that is not realistic, but it is what it is. Like the reality is almost everyone on this call has been in a situation where the CEO or founder comes out of the gates and says, go do X. And you know that X is not going to happen, but you still got to put the items in place. So that situation happens to you and you're handed this big fat goal for next year and you know your budget is not going to be sound. Sean, how do you tackle that beast?
Well, I think so many people in franchise development face this challenge every single year. There is a complete disconnect with setting up goals each year and realistic expectations. And it really starts with, if you just look at the industry numbers and if you look at, how many leads brands are generating, how much money they're spending on marketing, and just using the general numbers. I mean, the average brand generates about 200 leads a year. They do about 20 deals a year, and they spend about $200,000 in marketing. So if you do the reverse math on that and say, if your president wants you to do 40, then using those industry statistics, compare your own and see where you fall, because not all brands are equal, and we know that. So you got to compare your own, what your costs are, and then reverse the math and say, to do 40, we'll need to spend $400,000 if it's industry averages. If your brand is producing at a higher cost, then you got to do that math as well and set that expectation, because the misconception is more leads equals more deals. And I can easily generate more leads. They're not real leads. They're just names, phone numbers, and addresses. But real leads are candidates. There's engaged candidates. And so you got to be able to make sure that you're targeting the right audience and not just going after leads, and understanding where your brand is and how you're performing. Because if your momentum is moving up, then it's going to be easier to continue to grow. If your momentum is flat or low or dropping, it's even harder. So now you've got to take that into consideration. So it's really looking at how your brand's performing, unit economics, franchisee testimonials, and validation. If you don't have a brand that is growing rapidly, that's going to deter your development growth. So if you're stalled, stalled brands are harder to sell than brand new brands. I'd rather take a brand that has no franchisees and grow it than take a brand that has 100 that has stalled. So depending on where your brand is as far as current momentum, you got to look at then unit economics and performance. How are they doing? And finally, validation. If those are all three are positives, then I think those numbers and industry average numbers probably work. If you've got a knock in any of those categories, if you don't have good validation, I don't care how much money you spend on marketing, you're going to have a hard time hitting your goals. If the unit economics are not there, again, you're going to have a hard time convincing someone to invest into this business if that is not being portrayed. And lastly, you have to be able to articulate all those to candidates. So the unit economics have to be there. Your averages, like so many brands, just show top line revenue. And if your top line revenue is 1.5 million, but your owners are only netting 6% EBITDA, that's not necessarily a great story. So just having an IMAC team with top line numbers is not enough. You've got to be able to have franchisees validate that the EBITDA is there, the investment's there, and all those things are into place. So I come from like smaller investment brands. So there's a lot of people on the call. Some of them are doing restaurants, big investments, but anything under $200,000 to $300,000 and as an investment goes, if you can get to a point where they can get a full ROI on their total investment within 2 to 3 years, you got a probably good chance of getting some good growth and development. If they can get break even before the first 6 months, you're going to have a good chance of selling franchises. If it's longer than that on either of those, there's other options that people have that may make it difficult for you to sell franchises to.
All right, Sean, I got a follow-up question for you before I go to Jason. But one comment, I would argue that, and not argue industry folks, that it's almost harder to qualify someone at an investment level under 200,000 because more people have access to that much capital. Therefore, the protection of brand becomes so essential that if you put in some bad eggs, it's gonna increase the amount of support that has to go back to those franchisees. So it can actually harm the system if you have these pressure sales goals. My follow-up question to you is, and maybe this is the nugget for our audience that's trying to think, how do I navigate these conversations around budget for next year? So what advice would you have for someone that's dealing with a founder or CEO who has those unrealistic expectations that are coming to the table, even though everything you just said is the right stuff? How do you have that conversation? How do you even get to the starting line?
Well, that's really tough because it's not received well in most cases. So I think you just have to start with data, and you go with the fact that look at historical data with the brand and say, this is what our performance has been based on, what we see. These are how many leads we get. This is our conversion rates. And our goal is obviously to increase it, but increase it at a level that is reasonable, but more important, to have a plan as how you're going to do better. And so just by spending more money on portals is probably not going to yield you better results. So it's kind of like, okay, here's where, if this is where you want to go, this is probably realistic. We'll try everything we can to get to this. But it really depends on where your brand is currently performing. Because if your brand is not performing well from a development standpoint, it doesn't happen overnight. And so to go from 50 to 100% increase in development takes a lot of momentum. And it's just going from say 20 to 40 new deals a year is going to be is a really challenge unless you got a good momentum and story to tell. Just spending more money, hiring more salespeople is not going to get done because there's only so many candidates that are going to be willing to buy your brand. That's another misconception, is like, we get more leads, hire more salespeople, the math will work. Well, that's not necessarily how it works, because there's only so many candidates that are willing to buy, and you got to have a compelling story, and that's more valuable than spending money and having salespeople.
Love it. Jason, how do you navigate the landmine of high expectations, likeliness of accomplishments slim to none?
Yes, it's a fantastic place to not be. Sean did a great outline of budgetary averages and so forth. And so the value add I can put here is that, there's only a handful of markets, if you will, or opportunities that we can tap into. And then you've got to be able to challenge your sales process as well on a regular basis, right? So really interpret that feedback from your customers on where they're coming in, find those markets, and then create the messaging for it and adapt. So specifically, we've got referrals as the top converting opportunity, right? So if you're an emerging brand, you only have one other franchise, that's really a hard opportunity, especially when your CEO is saying, let's sell 10 more this year, right? And you've got less money. So you then turn to your digital marketing as your second highest conversion as far as quality leads. You can spend a little money there, but again, back to Sean's point, there's only a limited number of people that can be buyers for your franchise. So how do we get those people and attract them? Is definitely a budgetary conscious thing that you can evolve into. If you do use brokers, they do what they do, and they're very good at it. But again, that's part of your budget that you have to consider. And then of course, events. The events are great, but there's 20 people walking around, and it's the same 20 people that fill out the forms for all the other franchisors there. So now you're competing for those one or two people at that event that you can actually convert. So, but considering all those budgetary items, you want to focus on the ones that match your brand the best with your messaging, and then also the effectiveness for your sales team, right? So, listening to those calls constantly and finding out where those leads are coming in from. Like I said earlier, those franchise leads that came in from their own self-validation. I mean, we spent 22 hours figuring out what kind of car we want to buy. You can imagine how many hours go into a franchise assessment, funneling down from I want a franchise to I like this industry to I like these two brands, and then raising their hand. That's when we get them. So we've got to be very specific on how to match that sales process with the customer coming in to be really effective with our dollars. Really, I mean, we asked that age old question of, if I have $1 to spend on marketing, where am I going to spend it, right? And that's really what it comes down to. And based on your brand, you're going to have more effectiveness. So if you have a large network, referrals might be the place to spend it. If you have a very limited sales team budget, maybe it's brokers, because then you're farming out a lot more resources there. So, there's no like, here, do this, do this. It's very brand specific and message specific.
Appreciate it. Jack, how do you navigate this landmine? I mean, they've been navigating it for you so far, but what else do you have?
My head's been bobbing, not because I'm a bobblehead, but because Sean and Jason were really hitting it. And you know what? Which person on this call or in sales has not gotten that type of aggressive target in the beginning of the year? Most, fortunately, get it in this fourth quarter to set up and use that, that time to ramp up. But you know what? We have a perfect situation. Everybody has a lot of optimism about 2021, right? Including that CEO. But what we can say for sure is that it's fairly common that probably every year he's had some realistic goal of sales for you. Well, how about doing something different for a different type of year? Well, what is that? Well, when we set goals, we like to do SMART goals. Everybody knows that acronym: specific, measurable. A lot of times they say attainable, rational, and then time bound. Well, what I like to use the A for is aligned. And if you can get the sales goals aligned with others, including leadership, which absolutely has to happen, you use facts and data, as Sean said, then you can have a different discussion. It's that discussion around the definition of insanity. Hey, we've always done it this way. We've never achieved those results. So let's do something different. Let's do two things different this year that maybe can help you with internally selling, because that's the very first sale. Right? It's that internal sale to leadership. Once we get that done, then we have a realistic goal. We'll probably see it adjusted. So how do we do it? Well, I like to look internally and help the other departments, key departments, look with a realistic view of what the potential franchisees are looking at. See, they don't look at it from the same lens. They look at it as they have a job to do, so they plow through that job. But what I'm trying to help them understand, and what we can all do in maybe reassessing how we do this, is let me tell you what the potential franchisees see when they look into our department. And then let's build a plan around making it look more aligned with what they're looking for, as far as, being able to see the quality, the metrics, and all of that. The second piece is use our strategic partners. We have many that we've already committed budget to, right? So with them, when we get them involved in our goals and our strategies, and we help them understand what they can do to help us achieve those, help us deliver that message internally, and we have that advocacy, then we can do the same thing externally. Now, all of a sudden, we have the landscape that we can have a more rational presentation internally, maybe have more realistic goals, and most likely have a better path at achieving them.
Appreciate it. So just a few comments on as we wrap up the goal setting. Referrals continue to pop up. Let's own that. A data point that I love is from the American Marketers Association is 84% of deals come from a referral. So if you think 1 degree separated or a recommendation from a franchisee, if that's 84% of your deals, really what we're budgeting for is for the 16%. And we're going to chase that. And oftentimes we overlook the ability to crack into that referral network, which is our franchisees. Now, the reality is most people in franchise development, unfortunately, you're making up for the sins of the last guy or girl that was occupying that seat. They had high expectations. They were forced to put people into place. And when the existing franchisees aren't buying with that brand, best of luck. That's a validation error that you're going to have to uncover. If you're starting with a goal, and whatever that number is, say it's 20 for argument's sake, you start looking in buckets. You have existing franchisees, how many can come out of there? You have new franchise owners that are going to hopefully be growth builders within the organization. You may have the broker network that can account for some of them, and that narrows down the budget. So that's part of the beauty of this. If you go through the exercise the right way, whatever that initial budget was, it starts going against that 16%, and you try to make the other stuff work for itself. So, all right, so we've goal set. We've kicked our door or slammed it when we walked away from our CEO or founder and said, this is ridiculous. That's never going to happen. Hopefully at the end of the year, they don't fire us, and where we have to now go pick up the mess of someone else, and the constant rotation of franchise salespeople into new jobs doesn't continue. Let's pretend that that's the unicorn of this call. All right, so now we're moving into the budgeting. So Sean, I was going to say gun to the head. I don't like that saying anymore. Like, heavy pressure on your back. You have to go get us a deal. I'm going to give you the $20,000. And let me be clear. I've heard this before. If you can guarantee me a deal, I'll give you more money. Come on, get out of here. All right, I'm giving you $20,000. I need this $20,000 to make a deal. Now, we're going to micro this and we can macro it later, but you got 20 grand to spend. How do you spend it to get your brand in front of the right audience? How do you split up that or divide up that budget?
Oh, wow. Great. It really depends again on what's working for your brand. So, one thing I'm really big on is, having the ability to tell your brand story digitally. So, the website has to be there. To me, it starts there. And so it really depends on where you're at as far as that goes. If I had a horrible website, then my budget for the website is going to be number one. Then you because all the lead sources are going to be derived and sent to your website. And so that's how the progression of people go through their due diligence is they're going to check your website out first. Secondarily, then it is how do you become visible online? And so, you'll hear brands talk about SEO, which is really important, obviously. So is the site optimized? What are you doing from an SEO standpoint? But if you don't have good SEO, then you got to supplement that with paid. So you've got PPC, you got social media. PPC to me is having a less and less of an effect reaching people because all the portals, all the big players, all the brokers are all like heavy set on PPC. I think the opportunity is social, and the social is through storytelling and telling your franchisee stories, the like me stories. So we focus a lot of our effort on finding stories about franchisees that people can relate to and relate to our target audience, because then we can push that story out on social media, drive that awareness, drive into our website, and go from there. So we have had really good success. Our primary focus has been on social media. We do some portals because we got to supplement it. We do have I'm with True Blue, so we are a parent company strategic franchise system. So we have 5 brands under our umbrella, and so some of the presidents will say we need more leads. We supplement that with portals because portals will deliver leads. But if a gun to my head, I'm doing social as a way to create quick awareness, but you got to send them to a page that tells your story. Don't tell your story completely on social. It'll be hard to do it, but quick compelling message on social leads them to a landing page that tells your story, have your remarketing campaigns, all that stuff comes together. So I know I didn't give you a number, but that's the strategy that I would implement. Then we're doing today, and it's working great.
Appreciate it. Jason, let's pretend in a socially distant bar you bought the CIO a drink. They already signed up with SEO Samba. So that's out of the way. You don't need to spend the $20K on that. Right. Now what do you do with that dollar? How do you deploy it?
Well, Sean, obviously Sean leading this, he touches on all the hot topics throughout, where to spend that $1 or in our case, $20,000. But back to his original point, it depends. So if you've got a fairly distant large brand, you've got a lot of resources to pull from, either from your national marketing fund, and then also your referrals from your franchisees. If you're a smaller brand, under 10, if you will, and you've got that those $20 are worth everything in your budget, right? So spending that on awareness is huge. And one of the deficits that I've seen with a lot of emerging brands that we engage with and work with is their messaging, right? And that comes out of working with a professional like a PR company, well, like Nick. But essentially, what I found is that they're using industry vernacular to try to promote their business that nobody on the customer side understands what that means, right? So to issues such as trying to find customers in the wrong locations. Now Sean mentioned social, which is huge. PPC, which I would agree that unless you are doing very targeted geolocated efforts, if you're doing any kind of blanket PPC for franchising, that's sailing money right out the door. So being more efficient with that, with localizing your marketing is really strategic. And then again, I mentioned earlier, coattails. Let's ride them. Let's get after our competitors and see what kind of juice they have that we can steal with proper SEO and even some paid search. So again, I kind of brought it back to that, but essentially, it really depends on the size of your brand, on where you're going to send those dollars. And if I was a 10 location brand and I had $20,000, I'd really, either support social or digital, and then supplement with whatever kind of industry referrals that I could get from my, like Jack mentioned, partners, service partners or vendor partners. And then also look at being creative on your customers. So your potential customers, in the sense that if your brand is in a service industry, what other franchises that are out there that your brand would add value to them? So if you use, for example, restoration, we targeted carpet cleaners because they saw restoration work every day. We targeted plumbers. So you're finding these other brands that see that type of referral work that can send to your brand, and then it's a good fit. So you can directly reach out to them with a targeted campaign, whether it be social or email or however you want to do that, what's most effective for that particular market group. But, really lifting up the rocks, and looking under them and finding those little gems, because you might find a market that really gravitates to your brand just based on the partnership of referrals. If you can take somebody that's already in business and add another couple $100,000 in revenue right out of the gate, they can service all of the upfront costs with their other company and be profitable a lot sooner than traditionally. And that is a great resource to hunt for. So when you're young and you only have 20,000, you got to be scrappy, right? We got to be creative and scrappy and pulling on information and learning that through folks like us. I mean, that's really strategic in that deliverable.
All right, Jack. They've stolen most of it, but what are the nuggets that are left?
Sorry,
Yeah.
Jack.
So no, these guys are great. I'm taking notes with what they're saying because I'm learning too. Well, I'll tell you, I have to agree that it really is about visibility. You can have a great message and a great brand, but if people don't know where you are, it's just not going to help you. So if you're not already doing it, and you can squeeze it into that $20,000, I would absolutely get someone who can do professional videos and someone who is professional at digital marketing. That's not our sweet spot. But in the past, we've tried to do it ourselves. We want to stay focused on what we're good at. So what would we do? It's a visibility campaign. We're going to use videos to tell the story. And even more, we're going to use the social media platforms that we're on. And we're going to have videos that are very targeted. Coming from the sales world, we hear every day the questions that people give us that maybe we give an answer to that afterwards we're just not really, we wish we would have had a better answer. Well, those are the questions that we could make the videos on, right? The frequently asked questions that we can do better on that will really help people not just know who we are, but how does it fit? What differentiates us? What's the value proposition? Why us? Why now? If those 4 or 5 frequently asked questions are made into short videos, professionally done across the right platforms, you can go a long way with that and really touch on a lot of those folks who never even knew you existed. That's been our strategy, and it's been working.
Love it. All right, let me unpack a few comments here. One, I mean, here's a secret, guys. I mean, franchising's hard. I mean, the reality is, like, where do we spend our money? How do we achieve this goal? How do we convince someone to change their entire life, quit their job, invest their life savings in our brand? And by the way, when they sign up to be a franchisee with us, we don't want them having an opinion. Like, just follow our model. Like, this is a hard sell. Like, and I think that's why good on the industry. There's been webinars after conference on how do we get doing great at franchise sales. Look, the reality is maybe a fraction of a percentage point will ever grow from 0 to 100 units. It is what it is. Now, if we have just a little bit of money to spend, some of the things that I think are worth unpacking, the competitors. So take an Orange Theory Fitness. Orange Theory Fitness is sold out in America. Their developers have eaten up territories. They continue to build more units in those marketplaces, indicator that the franchisees are quite happy if they continue to invest and open up units. Okay, but to get to that point, think of the money that was spent to educate the marketplace of fitness, of franchising, the conversation of the people that did not qualify. And the reality is now you have a pool of human beings that maybe got to the entry point and were rejected because the market was sold out. Now they go back and they say, what else is out there? So don't overlook mapping out where are my competitors, where are they opening, knowing that that market probably had some dollars spent to educate that franchising existed. That's how you start pulling some of the budget around here. We're going to get into brokers in a second, but the brokers are another interesting pathway because we're paying them basically our entire franchise fee to get them to give their candidates introductions to our brand. Well, that creates a separate budget that almost turns into a rolling budget, and oftentimes the CEO or president or founder does not look at that as a part of the franchise sales budget. They're not allocating this. So how do you get that engine going over here? Maybe not a ton of deals, but some come out of there. Now, the negative and the positive, we could probably talk 2 hours on this, is the second you say no to one of their candidates, good luck, you're blacklisted. There is politics involved in being a broker. It is what it is. There's nothing that you can do about that. The other thing, and again, this is another topic we could probably spend a ton of time on, that blows my mind is that CEOs, founders discount the value of the resale. Because a resale is keeping a unit open, it's bringing a new person into the franchise family, and it's giving them the opportunity to invest. That you, as the leader in franchise sales, maybe you can increase the deal count on there. So oftentimes, the other thing that blows my mind is when CEOs go and say, or leaders above this department go and say, I want 10 deals, and you're like, okay, what if those 10 deals equal 20 units in development and they stay on the development schedule? Nope, 10 deals, 10 different buyers. So, and the reality is, and when we can find a buyer that's willing to invest in our brand, that helps impact all of the rest of this. So there's so many different things to unpack. But again, the bottom line is this is tough. How do we spend the $20,000? There's a bunch of areas. Sean, you said PPC. I want to slide over to this, and I tend to agree with you. And this will lead into my question. But PPC might not be working the way that it was, and I can see the indicators there. And it's fascinating to me because if I go back 10 years ago and said, hey, franchise sales, what's working? They would say Google. And it wasn't always just PPC. It was because someone Googled the brand after seeing it, and that was the last click. They said, I came to you from Google. But okay, so PPC is evolving, but there is that first click that comes to the site. And in my opinion, it could take a buyer 6 months from today. They've clicked on that PPC ad, they went to your website, they bounced. They left. And we've undervalued that value of that click because we can't track it or attribute it as it continues on. Question being, lead time frame, generally speaking, or even if it's in your gut, from the point that I get first introduced to a brand to the point I inquire to the point I buy, how does that timeline look in your opinion, based on your experience? What should we be looking for from an indicator standpoint on timelines?
Oh, great question. And I think this is probably the golden nugget that somebody could take away from this, is that so often I hear development people say that, well, the buyers buy quick. So I talk to them and then 3 weeks later they're signing. Well, that's an engaged buyer who's ready to buy. And that's completely different. What the top of funnel type person, I honestly believe that if you were to speak to first-time franchise buyers, I'm not talking about people who are expanding or multiple, but first-time franchise buyers, I bet you it's 2 years. I think what happens is they get the bug, they start looking for a business opportunity, 18 months to 2 years, and they're just looking around. Something happens whether it's a trigger moment, it could be change a job, cash, sick of their job, whatever it is, a trigger moment occurs and they're like, you know what, I want to do something. Those are people who turn into that 3-week buyer. So in reality, it wasn't like they were just all of a sudden they talked to a magic sales guy and somebody who was just walking down the street, next thing you know, wants to be a franchisee. It was something that was in their thought process for quite some time. What I've always approached and I always believed is that there are two candidates. You've got your engaged candidates and you got your incognito candidates, the people who are just kind of watching you. You need to have a strategy for both. I invest a lot of my time resources in that incognito because those are my franchise sales next year or 6 months from now or 18 months from now, whatever it is. The more you do there, the more you're going to prime your pump for consistent sales and development because those people are on the sidelines. They're still paying attention. I do email campaigns. I can see it. They're out there. I think the biggest mistake that brands make, especially franchise development people, is, and it's tough because I get it. They live in a world that's month to month. Like I got to get a deal this month to get a commission or keep my job. So that thought process is not, what where their head is. That's where someone's got to be above them. Development, VP of development, chief development officer, the marketing person is how do I keep those people engaged? And then you progress into creating trigger moments. So we can't control if they're going to lose their job or get money or everything else, but scarcity becomes something that could be a trigger moment to a candidate that, and I'll give you an example. I mean, we've had a really strong few months. For whatever reason, we've grown very rapidly in Houston to the point where we're close to almost selling out a market area, first market area, which is in Houston. I just posted something on LinkedIn saying, hey, here's our training class. We're excited that we're going to be very close to our first market with full service. And any candidate that was in Houston reached out right away and was just like, okay, I've been waiting too long. I need to do something. So that's where you can progress to create those type of trigger moments. Another one for us too was we developed a national account with a large franchise organization. We have 50 locations currently. They have 600. We have to grow rapidly so we can service all those locations. That's a trigger moment because now people are like, hey, I can see that this opportunity is really going to be great and it's not going to be around much longer. And so these are stories that we're hitting them with email campaigns, drip campaigns that because they are watching you, don't ignore those. I always say, instead of like painting for gold, mine your own mine, which is that those dead leads you had in your database for so many years, because they will bubble up if you have good, compelling story and that they're waiting for that moment. So,
hey, there's nuggets right there. Look, I promise people are going to get a takeaway or two from this. So look, we're already making progress. Go sell to Sean's franchisees in Houston. They can't buy any more True Blue. Jason, timeline. How does the timeline look in your gut and your feeling? What do you see in timelines?
So, and again, it's brand specific, right? So as Sean mentioned earlier, there was a low cost of entry. More dollars are available. Jack mentioned that it's critical to be more stringent on letting people in at that level. So you're going to probably have a little bit shorter time frame when more cash is available. When cash is not available and you have less of a buyer group because the investment is much higher, your sales process is much longer. My last brand, our investment was quite significant. So our typical sales process, probably if you qualified the person that wasn't incognito, ready to buy, it still took us 2 to 3 months to get that close because there's so much involved in that sale of education and knowledge transfer and getting them to a location where they could touch and feel and be part of it on a discovery day. And then somebody that came in, like we did some advertising on XM. So these are top of funnel people that were looking to get in the restoration area, and that was a longer sale. So that was 6 to 8 months, right? But those were strong leads. We cultivated them, we courted them, and then we brought them in. So, it really just depends on your brand, your threshold of what the budgetary options are to bring it in, and then what your messaging on how you attract that person. I love that idea of incognito lead nurturing Sean brought up. It's a real thing, and that lends itself back to SEO. It lends back to PR. One of the most effective ways that we did that was we supported our franchisees with PR at the time where they were getting news slots on fire prevention during Halloween, or how to clean your gutters, or just wherever they could add value to their community. And some of those things went national and really added a lot of value to our brand awareness, which then, of course, trickled down to the franchise incognito sales candidates. And then when you add in that scarcity trigger, like John mentioned, it's a real compelling factor. I mean, it's fantastic. I like it. So again, that's my answer. It just depends on your brand.
Jason, thanks for not giving an answer. So there's no secret, no silver bullet on Jason. So just so everybody knows, Jack, what's your timeline? Any secrets in yours?
Yeah, well, I will say, as Sean said, when we get somebody to finally reach out to us, then it tends to be in that 90 to 120 days. But when I talk before we can, finish a deal, but when I talk to them and ask them, how'd you find out about us and so forth, almost invariably, they found out about us months before that. In some cases, years. My most recent one was a year and a half. It was a year and a half ago, they ran across a ad in a journal, a periodical that's for the industry, and they saw it and they just folded it there. And then they did something that we push. So what we try to do is educate that group. I love the term Sean said, that incognito group. We know they're out there. We use things like LinkedIn to get our message out there. There's some experts, probably even on this in our audience right now, that really know how to use that. They follow us. We see them following us. Yet, they've never put a lead in, never contacted us, and so forth. So then what we start doing is really targeting. We do a lot of the remarketing stuff. We looked at our dead leads and went back to those guys and helped them understand, hey, follow our company page, on LinkedIn. It doesn't cost them anything. And this will help you learn about the industry, about family financial centers, about the opportunity while you're, doing whatever you're doing. Because when that compelling event happens, we want to be top of mind, right? And that's really what it takes to stay on their mind in a way that doesn't irritate them, doesn't aggravate them, not that phone call every week, but something that's going to educate them about the industry, about the brand. Why us? Why now? Why us when you need to do something different? That's really how we do it.
Love it. Appreciate that. So just a few quick comments. So one, and I've heard this in franchising forever, don't spend in Q4 because they don't buy during November and December. But if we're listening to what our panel is saying, the reality is some of that fuel that you put on in Q4 shows its face in Q1. So you're already playing from behind if you freeze the budget. So you got to think through the buyer behavior here too. It's a dead lead. They didn't answer my call. Maybe. Or maybe they're just not ready to have that conversation with you. Think about Best Buy. You walk in Best Buy, like, hey, can I help you with something? You're like, no, I'm just looking. Buyers do the same thing, guys. Like understand that the buying behavior is going to be different here. If you guys think across your guys' careers, I've never awarded a franchise. You guys have. I'm sure you've sold franchises to people with sales backgrounds, correct? Okay. Now, the reality is, if we're on LinkedIn, I get a sales message every 5 seconds. Reverse sell these people. Tell them to stop selling garbage and come join your brand and become a franchisee. Like, the reality are on there. The people on LinkedIn are people looking at career transition, which is someone that we want to target as franchise sales folks. Or they're salespeople who could be someone that we also want to target. So there might be something there as well. Okay. So now, in this final stretch, now we may have not solved the magic bullet. We're talking really well about doing the fundamentals well. Sean, I love the statement about Houston. Like, supply and demand still has tremendous effect on the sales process. If I say now, Jack, I'm going to let you start on this one, just so that you get the turn to have the long speech. The title is Franchise Domination in 2021. There's no doubt we still have political issues and we still have COVID issues that is going to create various degrees of difficulty for franchise brands to sell next year. There's no doubt we're in a disrupted landscape. But in your mind, how are you setting up mentally to dominate in franchise development next year?
Yeah, it really is about messaging and then reach. It's reaching those individuals who, for whatever reason, they're ready. Either they're an entrepreneur looking to diversify their business portfolio. So that's one of my areas I zero in on. Or they're a corporate person who either has gotten laid off, thinks they're going to get laid off, or just hates their job. So I stay in front of them, doing things a little bit differently. And I really try to understand and go back and do like an autopsy of those deals that didn't go with the type of prospect we wanted. Sometimes it's our mistake. Sometimes it's not the brand. Sometimes it's the messaging. Sometimes it was maybe the rhythm or the cadence of the sales process that maybe just knocked it out just a little bit. So by doing those types of autopsies, I come up with what we could have done better. That's what we integrate into business right now. And really, I recognize that we can't do this alone. We're a small brand. We can benefit from the expertise of industry experts. So we've been extra committed to leverage the franchise consultants, their expertise, their contacts, and we do it by educating them. I'd like to ask them to pitch to me my model, and often I can help them right there. So it's duplication of effort. We've never really done it that way. We kind of think if we just do a overview, a webinar or something, they're going to get it and then go do it. But every time I hear them pitch to me, I can see that we've fallen short in educating one of our best resources. So we're using our resources more this year. We're very, very confident that we've lined up our goals. We've lined up our strategic partners to be able to dominate in 2021. We have what a lot of people are looking for, a way to be in business, own a business, create a family legacy, and really to either take it from just owning a business or really creating generational wealth.
Appreciate that. Jason, I think you did the smartest thing. Well, I would argue the most challenging thing. You took a hiatus from franchise sales and went onto the supplier side, which I would say our side is just as difficult, maybe even more difficult than the franchise sales. Yeah. But you got your old self, franchisor Jason. What advice do you give Jason to dominate in 2021?
Oh, good question. So if I was back in the seat, back in the saddle, knowing what I know now, essentially, there's some things that are really working well, and Sean mentioned them. Social, using psychographics or psychometrics, if you will, really tying yourself into that franchise prospect's mind. What they're thinking, what action points are they at? Are they in transition and whatnot? Diving into that would definitely be an effort for this year. LinkedIn is, like you mentioned, it's full of candidates. You just got to figure out where they're at, when they're at, what they're doing, and target them as well. I find on LinkedIn engaging with them on some of their comments or posts really delivers an intimacy that you're not competing with anybody else, right? So, and if you understand a little bit of their world, either with your background or what they're doing, you can really strike up a good conversation and take it on offline. So, social's one initiative, with other digital marketing efforts, just having that clear process outlined for your franchise candidate when they come to your site, understanding what's involved. Jack's very good at this. I can attest to that. But yeah, when you come in as a franchise candidate, you got to know where to go. You got to lead that sale, and that's paramount. And I see that missing on a lot of brands. I see their messaging, like I mentioned before, their vernacular, their story. Jack brought up videos. We used to video every one of our franchisees right after training. Like, you see all these brand new franchisees and their picture on LinkedIn saying, "Hey, we just launched this." Take a video and ask them how they feel before and after that training, and you'll get some really great validation, and that would be compelling. But again, your KPIs are huge, right? So really assessing the data points that you need to specific to your sales process, understanding where your customers are coming from, and then tying that back to a measurable goal, and having all that aggregated data in one spot, right? Either through a proficient software or CRM, and challenge that sales process. If I can tell anybody a great story, and I'll take 2 seconds, is that when I inherited the franchise process that I had when I came into my restoration brand, it was 4 hours of 4 different webinars with one candidate. It blew them up. I never got anybody through it. I took that, tossed it out, went to the IFA, sat down with folks like Sean and Jack, and said, "How do I rebuild this?" And I learned immediately the best ways to do this. And it's just engagement, right? So let's get them on the phone. Let's talk to them. Let's figure out why they put their feet on the floor in the morning, what gets them out of bed, and then tie that back to our opportunity, right? Then from there, we're qualifying them. So that I would, if I can leave anybody that message today, is challenge your sales process, make it engaging, and make it real, and you'll reap the benefits from it.
And Sean, Domination next year. And truth be told, I mean, you've dominated probably every year that you've been in franchise sales. So much of what your answer is going to be is do what you know how to do. Sean once invited all of his candidates to the Wireless Zone annual conference so that they could interact with the franchisees. And then he awards record number of franchisees. So Sean, Domination, I assume it's much of the same, but how are you gonna win at this next year?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, a lot of great points from Jack and Jason on that. And I think the approach is really understanding the buyer behavior, and approaching it from the standpoint that things have changed dramatically. And, I hear franchise salespeople tell me all the time, "Boy, if I can get them on the phone, I could just tell them I can get them." Well, you're not going to get them on the phone. So how can you tell that story that salesman has and do it to someone who doesn't want to speak to you? And the only solution I have today, and I know of, is just using technology, digital storytelling, and PR, which is a big part of it. So that is going to be one thing to look at. Jack raised a great point. So many people analyze the deals that they've gotten and where they came from. I was like Jack. I looked at, okay, who was a great candidate that said no? Because if a great candidate said no, then we're not doing our job, because I really believe that with True Blue, that someone who's serious about our industry and learns about us will be so excited by the end of it that I can't imagine they would say no. So understanding that aspect of it. You got to create buzz about your brand. This is something I used to talk about a lot years and years and years ago, but it's really true. It's like, create buzz about your brand. I can't say enough about PR, because I will say that PR has propelled me in every brand I've been in. And if I look back at pivotal moments in any brand, it was from secured articles, not the actual necessarily article itself, but the power that article had, because I could share it with candidates and tell our story. So we're not selling them. We're saying, hey, here's an article that's reinforcing the story that we're telling you. And it is probably the most compelling thing that you can do. And again, using it and giving it shelf life is going to be absolutely critical. I think utilizing your franchisees' stories is going to be the way to sell. One thing I was on a webinar recently where I came to the conclusion, I was like, stop selling and start telling. Tell your brand stories, tell your franchisee success stories, educate people. Our candidates don't want to be sold anything. I've come to that conclusion. So it's just an education process. And I tell my development team members, if I gave you an assignment and said, you're in mergers and acquisitions, and you're going to go out and buy and acquire a business for us, what would your process be? And high level, and it starts with, okay, well, I'd narrow down the industry. I'd narrow down, the different categories in that industry, the different brands, and the value proposition, and why this would be a good one to acquire now. So, well, that's the same progression that candidates go through. So if you set up your awarding process that helps them structure how to buy a franchise, because a lot of these candidates have never bought a business before. So if you can structure on educating them on why this industry, why this brand, why franchising, and then your value proposition, and then why now, if you can answer all those questions in a storytelling format and have passionate people delivering it, your franchisees reinforcing it, you will have success. I promise you, because it's really what it is. Selling people and not having that support there is going to be really challenging.
Gentlemen, what a great discussion. Bottom line, there are no magic tricks to selling franchises. Like, do the basics. Like, get the basics down. Maybe earmark a little bit of your budget for 2021 to do some experimental things, but get the basics going. If I'm you guys, anybody that's watching this, and look, we held on to most of you. I think we lost 11 of you throughout the hour, so that means we at least engaged 36 of you. That's good. But reach inside yourself, ask yourself why you wouldn't buy this franchise, and you know the dirty laundry. And when you look at that answer, create the counter content, find the franchisee that would say, yeah, I understood how that could be an issue. Here's my take on it. Build the counter content, because if you have that hesitation, others are going to have it too. Erase the hesitations, position your best story going forward. Most likely you got some franchisees that already signed on and said, I am committed to this brand. Leverage your story. Gentlemen, thank you so much for the great discussion. I appreciate it. And to our audience, thanks for spending the hour with us. Thanks all. Best of luck in 2021.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Nick.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks.
Thank you.